What's up, future Shredlords? Welcome back. Death of the Fingers. Looks like we're back into the lessons today. I apologize. I just got a lot of stuff on my plate right now, and it's really important stuff. So I can't, I can't play around doing the videos and making, instructional videos all the time. But also, I didn't want my channel to become like, super ultra boring. Let's just do a lesson every single time. It's about practicing the skill sets necessary to become a better musician. That means songwriting is a skill that needs to be practiced. So practice writing songs. Improvisation is a skill. So practice improvising. Knowing what and how to practice is a skill. So practice that. And then, of course, acquiring the knowledge, if you will, necessary to, improve your sort of learning experience so you hit your goals rather than just spin your wheels year after year after year kind of deal. It's all about mindset. So don't lose sight of that kind of situation. So today we're going to be looking at these Beato arpeggios and a couple questions I got with respect to them and how to combine them. I was working with a few other people this week in terms of getting this thing off the ground, if you will, by combining two sort of ideas together. And I was just like, damn, that's actually pretty awesome. So I'm going to show it to you today. So the first one was, of course, is that just getting into the Beato. We're going to work into let's do A major today. Why not, Right, so here we are at the 5th fret of the low E string. So the first one is I'm going to move from 4 to 5 on the low E string. And then I'm going to do a major 9 here, which means I'm going to play 5, and then I'm going to do 7 on the A string, and then I'm going to do 9, if you will, on the D string. Right, and once I get there, I'm going to slide up now to go to 11 on the D string. Again. Jumping here to the G string, I'm going to play 7 and 9 again. Then I'm going to jump over the B string and play the high E string at the 9th fret. And then to turn it around, I'm going to jump back down here to the 7th fret. Okay, so that's how I ascend. I like these arpeggios because there's a slide in there, there's some string skipping in there, you got to control the string noise, the whole 9 yards. It's a great tool to practice, and it sounds pretty awesome too. Once you start to be able to factor these into the, into the diatonic sequence, you'll be like, yeah, that's pretty badass. Right, so once you kind of get good at that, of course, make sure that you take the time to essentially investigate the other ones. If I was going to do A minor kind of thing, that was an A major, right? So I'm just like, okay, I want A major. If I wanted A minor, I'd move down a whole step here, right, from this one. Right, so, and then you're going to do dominant 7, you're going to do diminished. I'll let you try to figure those ones out for yourself. Of course, you can just use 3 notes per string to help you figure it out. You just sit there and be like, okay, if I'm working, we'll do it here in A major, obviously. So I was doing G major, force of habit. Right, so I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3. I move up to the next position, Dorian. This is giving me all the notes, right? So you're going to be like, okay, half step from Locrian to move up to Ionian, and then this note, right? That's from... Right, so you start to see that you can then math it out. Then, of course, that comes from Dorian here. So that's a great way of sort of, using now 3 notes per string to help figure out these arpeggios a lot more competently, and it'll help you break down the fretboard and see it in multiple different ways, which is one of the most important skills you can actually acquire on the instrument. So, once you get done the major one, move into minor 7 and then, or whatever, minor, and then do dominant 7, do diminished and all that good stuff. And there are more, obviously there are a lot more, and I'll let you sort of see it. If you want to check out a more sort of in-depth or maybe some examples, obviously this is, I call them the Beato arpeggios because I learned it from Rick Beato. So just go right to the source, although he doesn't really explain it like that. He sort of just plays them. So now you have some sort of reference material, at least, to be like, okay, I kind of understand what he's doing there to a certain degree. And then, of course, you can watch some of his sequences where he uses them on a fairly regular basis, and he makes some really awesome chord progressions and arpeggio sequences, food for thought. So once I get there, of course, I'm ascending with the major. From here, now, of course, coming back down, it sort of gets problematic because it just, you know, it's kind of messy. So what I do is I just come back down. Now I'm skipping over, obviously, the B string again. So again, skip over the B string, that's 9. Back to 11, slide down to 9. Next string, A string is going to be 7. Next string is going to be the E string, that's 5. 4, 5. Okay, so that's how I like to descend. That's the first part of the lesson, if you will, is essentially when you run into a situation, you're like, my fingers do not like that at all. Try to think outside the box a little bit and be like, how can I rearrange some of these sequences to make it easier to play and whatnot? And you'll find that the more you do that, again, it's like practicing any skill. You'll get much, much better at it. And then you'll be able to figure these ones out on your own without any actual help, which is, of course, the end goal, is to be like, okay, well, if this is what I'm given, how do I rearrange some of these notes? You get the same situation with the minor pentatonic, doing them in like groups of 4. You know, if I were taking G major now and I move up here to this Dorian position, once I'm like, you know, you start to get into a bit of a situation there. It's kind of clumsy because of the way that the strings work. So again, you're sort of like sliding down, right? And then so you can get yourself into a more friendly position. And this is exactly the same sort of like skill set. In this case, I'm just, instead of completely reverse engineering what I did going up and just doing the exact same thing coming down, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I was like, if I do this slide down now back into A major, you know, then back down, you know what I mean? Like, no. So I don't like that. Instead, I was like, if I just kind of ascend, it makes it a lot easier. And of course, once you practice that enough, you'll get it very, very fast. And that's, you know, I basically learned this simple technique off of Frank Gambale, who's constantly doing stuff like that, where he's like, if you just rearrange the notes a little bit, you'll find that it makes it a lot easier for you to play. Now, obviously, you know, maybe you're like, well, going up and going down is one set, but of course you get tunnel vision. So you're constantly working in just one sort of system, in this case, these Beato arpeggios. So why not combine it with something else? And the next most obvious one's going to be the pentatonic scale, right? So if I do that now and start breaking down the pentatonic scale for dealing with A major, well, I know I'm going to move to the fret, the 5th fret, and then I'm going to play the major sequence. Right, then I'm going to move up here to the B and do Dorian, 7th fret, right? If I did it again, I'd be moving here. That's C sharp, right? For Phrygian. And so what I want to do now is just sort of combine those together in the 3-in-1 technique that Gambale uses too. So now I'm combining these arpeggios, the Beato arpeggios, with these Gambale 3-in-1 pentatonic sequences, and now all of a sudden I have a much more sort of like devastating lick to fall back on that's going to interest the listener. If you do too much, you've probably heard this with people sweeping arpeggios. If you do too much of the sweeping of the same type of arpeggios, it just gets to be like a blur of notes and whatnot. So having the tools necessary to sort of change it up, and again, rearranging these notes in a way sort of gives you a completely different sound, which who's going to complain with that kind of deal, right? So after I ascend, right, I'm here. I'm basically ascending with this. Now I can move there. If you wanted to just sort of simplify it down kind of deal, you're like, okay, just move up. Great sequence, right? 2 majors and whatnot. But again, that's something that we've done fairly predictably. So we want to take it up another notch. And so what we want to do now is add in this 3-in-1. So again, if I do this slide down, I'm like kind of shooting myself in the foot. Because now I have this crazy huge stretch to do, and I can't do it really, right? So what I want to do is move this note here to the B string, and then I've solved my problem. And then of course, now I'm doing 3-in-1. In this case, I'm starting with 1 note, right? Then it's these ones from the Dorian and Ionian position, right? Because again, sorry, my bad. Those ones, and of course this guy here. So I've got, right then, next note, which is going to be these ones, right? So I've got 1 here, 3, 1, then it's 3. That right there is probably one of the best sort of practice exercises you can do for yourself when you're actually playing on the guitar. Now, if I'm doing the frets here, it's the 7th here on the high E string. What note's that? B, right? And then, of course, I'm moving down here. That's a whole step down from B. That's A, right? So I have 3 now. That's going to be 10, 7, and 5. Right, so I'm starting at 7 here on the high E string, moving to the B string. I'm jumping down to 10. And then I'm going to 7 and 5. Then I'm moving here. That's 6 on the G string now. And of course, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to play 9, 7, 4 on the D string. Again, jumping down to the 5th fret on the A string. And then just ending with 9, 7, and 5. Again, slowly. Ascend with the Beato. Done deal, right? So doing stuff like that, and I'm not going to do the super shreddy stuff because I don't know if I could. I'm still working on it too, you know, but it occurred to me that that's a great way to really enhance these arpeggios, and you get a complete guitar workout, which of course is what you really want. And you can start to manipulate that, of course, once you do the arpeggio up. You might come down in 4s, stuff like that, right? Or maybe groups of 3, or you might do a sequence and whatnot, using like, you know, so on and so forth. So there's so many different ways of, again, just alternately changing it up. Maybe ascending using the 3-in-1 and then using the Beato to come back down. So there's a whole bunch of different, and then of course you can start to build on that. Once you're like, okay, well, I'm coming down here, right? I'm sort of moving down. You might be moving up to the 3rd degree. Right, so that's another way of sort of looking at it. Or maybe you get all the way back down here and you're like, okay, maybe I'll do the Barnsby arpeggio ascending, right? So you're like in back here. Now you got 3 systems going on. You're like, okay, I'm here, classical system. And then you're like, maybe I should have practiced up a little bit, but close enough, right? So those one step leads to the next and then leads to the next until all of a sudden you're doing a journey of 1,000 steps, and it's just consistently moving around. And initially you probably want to start out just doing like all the major stuff, right? Stick with the major scale and all that good stuff. And then afterwards you're like, I can start mixing and matching and whatnot. So you might start off with like a Beato and a minor, and then jump down and play the pentatonic scale, and then jump into like dominant 7 as maybe an inversion kind of situation. You're like, okay, here's the A, moving down, there's Locrian, there's this one here, the Aeolian, obviously, F sharp, right? So you're like minor 7, or maybe you're gonna do like a minor 7 flat 5. That one's tricky. Now, I'm not gonna lie, right? You sort of, whoops. Right, you're gonna get into that kind of a deal. I'm not gonna go through all of it because you should try figuring these things out on your own, but you get the point. Is don't just stop by doing just one and then never moving on from that. The second part of the lesson was someone was asking me about, like, you know, finding pattern recognition with the melodic minor, and I kind of fell across one that I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Let's take this G major now. Well, let's stay in A major. Why not? Let's do this A major, right? Right, and if I dumb that down to just a pentatonic, of course, we just did it. So what I want to do here is that when I'm doing this major scale, when I get this sequence here, I want to reverse the order. Normally, melodic minor. That right there helps out immensely. Then I'm just going to continue on with the normal sort of like pentatonic shape in this case. Now, once I get to this next one here, I'm going to add this half step. Right? So in my mind, I was like, okay, look, there's basically the pentatonic scale. And then afterwards, I was like, look, if I do it this way, major scale, right? And if I make a few alterations to that pentatonic scale by just swapping some things around, then I'm good to go, right? So essentially, so this configuration, swap it around. And the key here is like all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, that sequence of notes essentially is repeated again once I move to Dorian here, except they're all stacked on top of each other. So in this case, the middle one needs this little sort of like group of 4 notes. Okay, well, that makes it easy for me. Now, all of a sudden, I just need one piece of information. Anytime I have these 3 notes in a row, these 3 strings in a row here, where I have this whole step, I should say, sorry, I can now, in the middle, just do this one little sequence by moving down a half step and going up a half step from the original one. Okay, that makes it way easier. I don't have to get into the theory or nothing else. It's just like, look for this pattern, and then just add this extra note sequence in. Right, and of course, if I kept going up, oh, well, there's that new one there. I already know that I can just swap around the order. So now I've got the 4. Done, right? If I kept moving up again into the next one, I'm going to get the next sequence and the next one. And the thing here I would recommend is, you know, get a copy of the scale chart or something like that. I like to use the one that just uses 5 rather than the 3 notes per string system. The 3 notes per string system sounds a little weird to me when you practice it like that. So I find the ones based around the pentatonic scale work a lot better. So I'll leave it up to you. I think the one I got was J. Schuyler or something like that. I'll look and see if I can't track it down again and leave a link in the description about which the scale system that I use for 3 notes per string. But by looking at it, I was like, okay, that's how that works, right? But ultimately, what you should remember is that, again, pattern recognition is the most important thing to remember here, because you're like, okay, I already know this scale. Now I can make a small alteration to it and get a completely different scale by just doing some simple stuff, right? So again, and then I'm like, then you're like, oh, look, the major scale. So all I'm doing is reversing the order of the notes. Again, that makes it way easier for you to remember this stuff. Anytime you get to a major position, you're like, okay, if I want to play melodic minor because they're doing some fancy chord right now that requires it, or a turnaround or something like that, then you can be like, okay, I can just use these pentatonic shapes or however you want to look at it, and then just make a small alteration to it and then get the scale that I want. Finished, right? So again, you're sort of 4 and then 2, right? 4, so on and so forth, right? So very important. And notice that if you moved up again, one more here. Well, this one's right. So there's that sequence, the exact same one that happens right there. And when I do that, I have this now, of course, right? So now since I'm starting here at the 3rd degree, I have to, instead of use the Phrygian mode, I want to invert it. 2 notes, then 4, and then you're into the next one, right? That right there is incredibly useful piece of information, because I find that the melodic minor is a mystery to a great many people, and they constantly asking me stuff like that because effectively they buy videos. They're like, this is going to help me, and it will help you to a certain degree once you have the scale system down. But just getting the scale system down can be very difficult because, you know, it's weird. It's a weird sound. Okay, it's what I call a slippery scale. And then afterwards, you can be like, okay, when do I use that? And if I'm playing in a particular key and stuff like that, how do I get to a position where I can use the melodic minor? Now, in my opinion, it sounds the best when you're talking about a diatonic chord sequence, like if I start in G major, right? There's my 1 chord, right? Then I got my 2 chord. Then I got the 3 chord here. Then the 4, right? Then the 5. Whoops, sorry, 5. Let's try D7. Not C7. Then, of course, E minor. Right, and so on and so forth. So what I do is I move to the 2nd degree here, and I play the Aeolian position. Right, and then I can just keep going. There's the major right now. Then right, so and then you can just map out each one of those sequences, if you will, in terms of like, okay, well, if I'm starting, this is technically going to be my Aeolian position. That's how I'm going to start stacking this sequence together, starting off the 2nd degree. And then in certain instances, of course, if you're playing in G major, you could also jump up here to the Aeolian position and also play just the melodic minor in reference to that, right? So now you're like jumping up. Wow, that one threw me for a loop there. So yeah, it takes a while to wrap your brain around a kind of situation. And to practice this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend just finding a nice little vamp. There's quite a few of them, but I'll leave it up to you to figure out which one works best for you, either 1 chord or 2 chords and stuff. Just look for a vamp for melodic minor or something like that, or, you know, look for the chords with respect to melodic minor. So if you're starting in the 1st position, it's going to be a major minor chord. So if you find a vamp that's like the major minor chord, then you can play starting at whatever position is. If it's like A major minor, then you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to start with this. And be like, that's awesome, right? And you're off to the races. So those 2 pieces of information there should help out significantly in helping you sort of develop a great practice regime where you're getting all of the sort of like the cylinders firing at once, right? So essentially you're sort of like combining the ideas, whether it's using some simple hacks to rearrange the notes to make the playing of this particularly tricky sequence of notes a little bit easier, or you can again ascend and then start to combine two systems together, in this case 3-in-1 pentatonics with the Beato, and you can change out this arpeggio sequence for another one, of course. Maybe you're going to be like, I just want to do a major 7. Wow, okay, nice. Right from there, right? And you're going to be then moving into the next one, right? So it's another great way of sort of using and recycling the same piece of information. Just change the arpeggio. It's no longer a Beato. Maybe it's just your standard triad type deal. Now notice I did it with there and then I moved my first finger because I got to jump my pinky back. Again, doing stuff like that forces you to consider how to arrange your fingers as well, because you'll be like, oh, there's no way I can do that, or it doesn't feel natural. And then all of a sudden you'll get in the habit of just doing that stuff in fractions of a second. And that can be the difference to making your solo sound killing and your killer, and your arpeggios or whatever else it is sound great, or stumbling all over the place with your fingers and whatnot and being like, I didn't quite nail it. So I think that's all there is to say on that bad boy. I've taken up 26 minutes of your life. I hope it helps. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate every single one of you. Enjoy the music. Don't forget to practice all of those skills with improvisation, writing music, and then learning how to practice effectively so that you spend months mastering material instead of years. See you in the next one.